All right, welcome back to the Mission 300 podcast. Here's the question we're going to go after today. Is it possible to have true strength without experiencing failure? And the premise that we have, guys, that we're going to dive into here is that we do forge genuine masculine identity by actually confronting the weight of defeat as opposed to avoiding it altogether. And so what we want to do is get into some actual experiences of ours and what could be described as rock bottom or near rock bottom moments of our lives, and dissect things from there and see what we can come up with. Because I know we all hope the answer to our question is yes, we don't have to experience failure. But if that's not the case, we need to know what we're up against. So let's get into it.
I think we need to first define what is rock bottom. Is rock bottom meaning that you become hooked on drugs and then you're hitting rock bottom before you realize I need to stop doing this, or name whatever the issue is? Or is rock bottom that you've tried and tried and tried and it's failed, and so now you're at a ground zero trying to start again? I think we need to define those rock bottoms. So I think some people, if they're dealing with addiction, they're dealing with life habits that are destructive, and they don't want to change, rock bottom is a really good place to come to an awakening. I want to move away from that, though, today, because I think this is a different version of rock bottom. I think more of that place in the poem "If" by Rudyard Kipling, where you've exhausted yourself in a worthy endeavor, and now you have to pick up the pieces and start over again. That's the rock bottom that I want to kind of focus on. And, do you have to hit that? That's a good question. I think it kind of ties into getting punched in the face when you're boxing. You can train and train and train, but there's nothing like what that experience is. Or you have all these great ideas and great vision for a business that you could form, and you labor and you work at it, and then you go out there to start it and no one's interested. And now you're at zero. But I think there needs to come a place where maybe we could take some learning that we can go do those things with that expectation, because it's important that you go do, if you're going to start a business, at some point you're going to have to go through that process. So how do you prepare yourself, and how do we look at this differently? It's funny, in a lot of reality, like, we have all the cliches, we know not to think this way, but one of the greatest fears of men is the fear of failure, the fear of being inadequate, the fear of not being complete, the fear of being discovered that you're a nothing. There's a great fear in that. There's also the fear of being dominated and in a weird and controlled, not in a control like you have a weird controlling boss or they're a little over involved in your work, but in the controlled that you can no longer think for yourself, that you don't have the autonomy to make your own decisions. So it's this weird balance line between, I don't want to be looked at as a fraud and be it a fake and to be inadequate, but I also don't want to have someone subjugate me in order to get there. So you're in this weird place. And one of the other elements is the fear of failure. But most of the time we spend our life trying to run from failure, thinking that avoiding defeat is the secret of staying strong. Like, if I can just avoid failing at something, then at least I can look like I know what I'm doing. At least I can look like I'm going through the motions. Now, if you've listened to this podcast long enough, this isn't really our thinking, but I kind of want to just set the precedent. You cannot build unshakable identity when we talk about our identity until you've completely crushed and forced out the old identity where you could build up. And Jesus says this 4 times. I pulled it up earlier here. It's in John 12:25, Luke 9:24, Mark 8:35, Matthew 16:25, and Matthew 10:39. That's every gospel and twice in the book of Matthew. So I guess that's 5 times. He who finds his life will lose it, and he who loses his life for my sake will find it. So when I'm talking about a crushing, don't over dramatize that. I'm talking about the lies that you believed you were, which is the inadequacy, the incompleteness, all these fears. When that dies and you allow a new life to form, you will look at these things differently. All of a sudden, failing at something is no longer failure. It's building. The terms start to change. So I want to get into the switching of the terms. But with that, kind of share your perspective on that general idea, what I was saying, and then let's get into how do we transition out of that.
I think what I've seen in my life is, and it's interesting because I was talking with somebody this past weekend who was looking to get into video and photo, which is what I do professionally. And he was like, I just want some advice. Like, I need to like build up my portfolio so I can like get clients and stuff and try and show people what I can do. And I think Tommy will get this because it really is just sales, to be honest. But I was like, dude, you just got to put yourself out there 100 times and accept the fact that 99 people are going to say no to you. Like, to come and like do photos for you or do video for you and like offer to do it for free, people will still say no because they're just like going to not have time. They're not really interested. We're not really looking for that right now. Like, they're going to think you have a motive. And two, like when I've been in that situation where I've wanted to do that, I feel stupid. Like I have imposter syndrome. Like I'm like, okay, I'm not really that good. Like I'm telling you guys I can do this for you, but I really have no experience. Like even with my latest work, going and filming an ultra marathon, I was like, I have literally no experience filming sports, running, like even a full length kind of documentary style thing. The whole time, even on the flight over there, I was like, I'm not qualified for this, to do this. And the whole time I had fear of failure. I still do because this project is not finished. I'm still working on putting it together. Like it can still fail. But also, what even is the definition of failing? I think going out there and actually going after it and trying to do this thing is way better than having not tried at all. I wouldn't even know. Like how would you even know that you will fail at something if you don't? And I've failed a decent amount of times in my life, more than I would probably like to admit. Even hiking the Appalachian Trail, my first attempt was a complete and utter failure. And I let that failure affect me so much that the in-between time I was failing ethically as well, because I just was scared of failing again. So I was like, well, why would I try again? Because I'm going to fail again. And it turns into this negative feedback loop of not only maybe if you accept the fact that you can fail one time but then you experience failure and you're too scared to go through it again, you have to go through it again and you cannot be scared of it. I was listening to a little podcast and when we're recording this is the day after the Team USA won gold in hockey, and I was listening to a clip from the goalie from the year that the U.S. beat the Soviets. That movie Miracle on Ice is from that, and he said failure is not fatal, but fear of failure is, and that really stuck with me because that is what has been fatal in my life. Every time I failed, it has brought me, in a sense, new life, new experiences. Every time I failed, it has brought me to the next point that I need to be at. And that's what I was telling the guy I was talking to this weekend about starting photo and video. I was like, dude, every project I've gotten is because I've put myself out there, failed to get somebody to let me come do photos and videos. But after I did it once, there was somebody else who wanted me to come do that for them. So I was like, just accept the fact that failure is just part of it. And failure is actually a really good thing because it's going to teach you so much that if you're really only succeeding all the time, to be honest, I don't know what you're learning. And so the fear of failure is the only thing that has held me back in my life. Like, not a lot of stuff has held me back. Me being scared to get out there and go do it, that's held me back consistently. And the fear of failure has been definitely one, like, that's a huge mistake in my life. Regrets related to the fear of failure. So I think it's super relevant because failure is like, it's actually, dare I say, it's a good thing. fear of failure, very dangerous. Failure is going to teach you a lot. And failure because you're moving towards something, if I have to clarify that you don't want to go after failure, but failure is just a natural part of it. And it's led to really good things when I've pushed past that.
I think I totally agree with everything you said, Caleb. I think that's really good, and I see it just in my day-to-day work being in sales. Like if you're scared of failure, you're just not going to do anything. And if you're not doing anything, you're not putting faith in anything either. Like you have to have faith in something in order to move to something, right? I think of like, if I didn't have faith that our product worked, then I would never do anything, right? But I have faith that it works, so I have confidence to go and do something. So like often what we do, and I think it's funny how like business correlates, right? And like you can take these same principles, like Caleb saying, well, I'll do free video for you, and if you like it, like, we'll probably end up working together, which I think is so true. We do the same thing. Hey, I'll come do a demo at your farm, run your product through. We'll show you the results free of charge for them. Cost them nothing but some time. And if it works, it works. Obviously I'm there with the intention of, I believe this is going to work for you. I know it's going to work for you, and I'm there to show you it, right? But I'm also there to get something out of that, right? But I think if you didn't have the faith in that thing, you would never be, you wouldn't move anywhere. Like nothing moves without faith. And I think one of the things that has held me up, I think, is seeking approval from men. Like seeking approval. Like if I'm going to seek approval, then I'm going to get stuck in not doing anything where I'll fail. Because we think we are proved by the wins, but in reality, all the people that you would consider winners are just really, really big losers. They've just lost a whole lot more than you have. Like, Caleb, think of the biggest filmmaker has probably been told no by so many people. No, we don't want you to film our project. Jason, the greatest musicians out there probably have tens and thousands of failed songs, or have gotten tens and thousands of rejections for their songs to be played, right? And so I think getting past that for me has been my biggest hang up, and it comes down to like, when I'm sitting across from a person asking for them to do something, I put so much of their approval in what I'm doing based on how they react to it. And if I can rewire my brain to just, doesn't matter what they say, there's going to be someone that will, I can keep moving forward. And sales, like my first 6 months in sales, I got so many no's that it's like you get to the point and you're like, will someone say yes? And eventually do. And eventually, I have a demo tomorrow morning with people. I don't know how it's going to go. I'm a little afraid, but I've built a confidence over hundreds of demos now that I'm like, hey, if something goes wrong, at least I'll learn something new. And every time something goes wrong, I learn something new about that.
We were talking about, changing a perspective of it. Like Tommy, it's like, I think it's interesting watching you in this concept of, yeah, I'm a little afraid. It's maybe it's not the kind of fear that I would feel, like being afraid to go demo it, because I don't even know how the product works. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a little different. Yours is, I really want to get this customer. So it's not really a fear. It's more of an expectation you're wanting, and you don't want to be disappointed, but you'll move on. So yours is more of, I hope this isn't disappointing. I hope it isn't disappointing for the customer. Like you don't want it to waste their time either. So you're not really in a question whether it's a good product or not. You've sold enough. You already know it does what it's supposed to do. Now you're trying to offer it to something different. So there's stages of this. And I think most people don't ever get off the ground. And I think there's a good picture if we could understand the development piece and even getting to that point, how do I lay down my life so I can actually find my life? Like, how do I lay down my thinking over here? Because break it into stage. How do I lay down my thinking over here so I could take on a new thinking? How do I lay down a way of doing things so I could take on a new way? So you're always in this dying to one thing, taking on something new, which is interesting because that is kind of the whole principle of the kingdom of God, is a place of death, burial, and resurrection, right? So David taught me, which he'll be back on the podcast hopefully this summer, busy in school. He taught me something, and it was really really helpful in my workouts of getting to the places I want to be in my workout. Being 55 years old, my goal was I wanted to be hit back to the weight that I once did when I was in college, because in fairness, I kind of had this big long lull of lifting. So it's not like I've been lifting all that time, but and I'm just about back. So I'm kind of been working through this. But one thing he says, you got to, and you do this in stages, but one of the stages is you've got to set some workouts where you're going to failure. And so that term failure all of a sudden had a whole different meaning to me. And I think that's what I mean by we have to change it's the same failure, but the meaning of it changed. So how I interpreted it. So I push, like, let's say you're doing a bench and you're setting up your reps and you're having a spotter, and you go till you literally cannot push that further. Failure. You hit your breaking point, but you're deliberately hitting your breaking point. So I was doing this with my workouts, and all of a sudden it started changing, and I started seeing something happen. So for those that don't know how a general overview of muscle growth. So muscles grow stronger through a process called hypertrophy. I don't even know if I'm saying it properly, but hypertrophy or whatever the word is. All right. So that's the process that is the way you grow. So you take intense exercise, like let's say weightlifting, rock climbing, something that has an intensity to it, and your muscles create these tiny micro tears in them throughout the fibers. So you get all these tears, right? So no one ever wants to go out and tear a muscle. Tommy, you know what it's like to tear a muscle or to really pull a muscle playing a sport. So we're not talking about like that kind of tear. We're talking about deliberate tears that you're doing to your muscles. Then what happens is these tears trigger a repair mechanism to take place, and inflammation signals the area that is torn, and the cells come in and they start rebuilding the damaged tissue. They add nuclei, they add protein, and they rebuild them thicker and more resilient than before, right? So that's your muscles growing. And it's not destruction for its own sake. It's controlled stress followed by adaptation. And it's fueled by rest, nutrition, time, and it starts building. And so without the initial breakdown, there's no growth. Muscles stay the same. So you have to push the muscles till they break healthily in a proper environment, and then allow a rebuilding. So you're constantly pushing to failure, and then they're rebuilding and you're getting stronger. So if you think of these like life challenges, so think of life challenges, right? Whether it's heartbreak, failure, and something that's super disappointing, expectations that fall apart, they force us to confront the weakness and rebuild. You don't have to go through a major life catastrophe out of dumb decisions. So we're not referring to that. That's more like pulling a muscle in a game. All right. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about the deliberate practice of bringing yourself to failure, where you discover the weakness in whatever you're doing or whatever's going on in your life, and you can rebuild. So you can do this through reflection. You can do this through developing habits. Just as when you, like, if you skip the gym, like you skip a couple weeks of the gym, you feel that really hard. But if you're regularly doing this, you feel healthily fatigued. You guys know what I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of embrace this breakdown. And that's how we transform pain into power, transform the brokenness into something new and living. And so this is the process. Your body physically does it. We do it mentally, and we do it spiritually. So when we're talking about failure, we need to switch our game plan, that we're not trying to get our identity from it. We're not trying to get our value from it. We're trying to push the limits. So Tommy, your boss was really great when you walked through this original process of how he got you selling. He basically got you selling to clients that have said no for so many years that everyone had to deal with no from them. All right. So you had to go deal with that. Why did he do that? To build the resiliency of keep asking and he already knew they were saying no. So you weren't gaining, you didn't know this at the time. You knew it later, but at the time, you didn't know that you're getting all the duds, but you got the duds so you could practice and you could build that resiliency going on. If we were deliberate with ourselves, that's how we hit rock bottoms. We discover, okay, I struggle at this. But you've actually created safe zones to actually do this. You've actually created environments where you're mentally prepared versus someone who's never prepared themselves, and all of a sudden, here comes the mess, and you're broken. I don't know if they actually heal properly. They can, but it's a whole lot more work than just being deliberate of you putting yourself into failure places and building. So I want to separate from hitting rock bottom and deliberately hitting your failure points in life. One has so much value. The other is really hard. And even Jesus saying, when you lose your life, if you find your life, you lose it. But if you lose your life for his sake, you find it. That's a deliberate choice. Some people come to that when they come to the end of themselves and they had to go through so much pain that even though this still works, it's still a truth. It seems like they have so much further to go than someone who just comes to it right away going, man, I'm thinking wrong. I'm doing wrong. This is wrong. I need to change. We can choose those points.
Why do we call it failure though? Like, why is that failure? Like, when I'm hearing you talk with like the strength training and muscle training, it's like, that's really not failure, right? Like, that's going to the max, which should now be normal, right? It's almost not like a failure in a sense, but it is, because you're not where you want, right? Is that kind of what you're getting at? Like, you want to be able to bench 225, but you're going to have to fail 180 before you get there, right?
Okay, that's a great point. That's where we can change our view. No, the term is accurate. You're hitting the point where you actually hit a max that you cannot move forward. So the motion fails. The movement fails. So it fails. That's an important place to be, that you've got to hit a point where this is a failure point. Like a rope, if it's being pulled, you pull it, you keep pulling it and you keep pulling it like on a machine until it snaps. Okay, at this poundage is the failure point of that rope. So that way you know what a rope can hold, like if you're rock climbing. So the same is true with this. We've made it that the problem is we're so weak in development. We try one thing and it is failure because you can't move forward. So now you know how to strengthen that area of the rope or that area of your life. We don't use it as, okay, no, it is a true failure point. So now I can build on it. We take it so personally devastating in the early times. I'm no good. I'm incomplete. That's the part where failure and identity shouldn't even be in the same picture.
Do you think that's why maybe we've been there too, but so many people don't even try to push the limit, because once you do, you find your failure point, and we have such a insecure negative connotation about that we don't want to face that. We don't want to face the reality that I have physical or mental limits. And so we don't even push, because we know what we'll feel like once we hit that. And that feeling of failure is just, well, screw that. I guess I can't be any better than that. So I'm just not even going to try.
Yeah.
Maybe we look at failure as the exposing of our facade that we've lived. So think about it, right? I'm training. Hey, I've been able to do my mile runs. I got a good time on my mile runs. And then I go out on a trail and run with someone who's really good at running. And I'm going to try to keep up my pace with them. And they might be just flying. I'm exhausted within 100 yards going, man, I am not a runner. But I've been talking about my runs. Man, I got this good run. I got this good time. And then all of a sudden I meet them and they just casually go on and I'm exhausted, breathing heavy, going, what's wrong with me? Well, you put up a facade. You're not being true. So if failure shows trueness, but it's not a limitation. It just shows where you're truly at. And so I think we lie to ourselves, we lie to other people, and that's why failure exposes our facade.
I think that's you're speaking to me, Brian. I mean, geez, like, can you not talk right at me? As I was doing the run and plunge, like that was the biggest thing I was afraid of was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to run 5 miles. And I haven't ran 5 miles. And now there's gonna be people that know me because not only was Mark on the podcast and now he's taking a liking to me when I'm there and he's like, oh, Tommy, you made it. You're going to run 5 miles. Everyone's looking at you. And it is the facade that hits. It's like, oh boy, why am I doing this? This isn't me. You know, I can't do this. All these lies start to come up. But I think the greater thing too is like, yeah, I wasn't the first one back. I also wasn't the last. But I also had to keep making a decision throughout the whole run that I'm gonna finish, right? And granted, it wasn't very fast, but it also showed me exactly where I was. Like I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I couldn't lie to myself and be like, "Oh, I can do this. That's no problem." I actually had to confront myself that I'm not as fast as I thought. I don't have as much endurance as I thought I did. And I think that is just so true, having to face the false identities and all that. And another point, going back to a little bit with like work, like the first 6 months I think were hard and challenging is because every day my identity became the no's. All the no's that I received became my identity. And I started to think, oh, maybe I don't have something that I can offer people. But in reality, those first 6 months, what I was doing was I was gathering information. And honestly, those first 6 months, all those conversations have become a gold mine for me now. Because I asked all the right questions. I knew kind of what I needed to go. And I stumbled my way through conversations, but asked tough questions that led to, okay, now I go look in our CRM and I see, oh, I had a conversation with this person. I know all this, and this. And I make a call. And now it's with confidence because I know all this stuff. And now I have also the experience to go forward into that. And so I think it's interesting just kind of reframing some of that stuff and not letting it be like your identity. And honestly, that's the hardest thing I've been having with training for the Tough Mudder is all my friends are runners. And if you ask them, would Tommy be the one who's going to run 15K? They're like, no. Tommy's the guy who should join the strength competition. Tommy's the guy who's going to bulk and eat all this food and get bigger. Well, here I am this weekend. All my buddies are there. And I'm like, let's go for a run. And they're like, what? We're going for a run? And we go for a run. And dude, I'm the last one. Like, I'm sucking wind. Like, I'm the one this is for. And I have to face that false identity every time and that fear. But it's also amazing the community you can have when you're doing that because all those guys are in support of me of like, dude, you're actually doing it. Like, you're doing it. And it's not hard. And we can see it's not hard for, like, we can see it's like really, or I think I said not hard. It is really hard for you. Like, we can see that you're sucking wind and that, like, your calves are literally so tight and there's nothing there. And you're, even when you're walking. But I think it's just so encouraging. But I mean, exactly what Brian was saying is you have to face that false identity and confront it, right?
I wonder if that gets to our initial question then, because we're We're asking, can you have an experience or really have true strength without experiencing failure? And if we understand that failure isn't the state of being or the identity that you suck and you're going to always suck, it's a process of development, and really split that line and understand it's not an identity thing. It's a process of development to where I push myself and eventually I find my limits, and then I breathe, recover, and I push again. In that case, you would actually welcome failure because it's the only way to develop strength.
Yeah, 100%. I think with the failure, you're showing strength because you're actually going to go prove it. You're going to show your strength, and you're going to fail. You're always going to fail, right? And I think that's kind of the mindset you need to adopt too. Like, okay, whoop-de-doo, I ran 15K. Well, technically that was a failure if I was trying to run a marathon. If I didn't, if I could have ran one more mile, that's still a failure, right? I mean, if we're being honest, like if we're going to be in a life in pursuit of full identity, like doing less than what you could have done is always going to be a failure. And so I think there's this point of like, you need to be content and you need to be strong in your identity, but you also need to know that you can always push that limit one more, right? And maybe I'm wrong. I mean, push back too. Like, maybe I'm just.
I mean, I agree with.
Go ahead, Caleb.
Okay, I was just gonna say, like, I'm guilty of that recently because Tommy has been going crazy with this ice bathing thing, and I felt very challenged. Like, I was like, Tommy cannot be getting away with doing all these hard things and me not be involved in some way. So I went and I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go jump in this frozen lake, which I did. But when I got in there, the shock to my system, I was like, I'm out of here. And it lasted like 10 seconds max in there, which for me was good. Then I text him, and then Tommy later was like, I spent 15 minutes. But still in that moment, like, regardless of what other people are doing, when I got back to my truck, I was like, man, like I realize now, because I got over the fear of even jumping in there to start with, that man, I could have stayed in there longer because it was so hyped up in my mind. And even the moment that I went under, like, it was such this big thing that I was scared of. And then when I finally did it, I was like, okay, awesome. I'm out of here. And I got back to the truck and I was like, wow, that wasn't as bad as I was like making it out to be. All these different fears playing through my head. Like, I was even scared there were going to be other people out in this mountain lake middle of nowhere. Like, there was nobody else out there. There was wolf tracks, but besides that, but the hype up of the fear in my mind of the moment versus doing it and after, there was actually within 5 minutes of it, there was almost a tinge of regret of not staying in longer, because I was still like letting the fear of failure of, oh man, like all this stuff built up that I had made the fear of failure bigger than just the success of doing it. And if I had really focused on, okay, I'm going to go do it. If I fail, that's fine. When I got in there, it would have been like, okay, I can do more. And I think sometimes we build it up so big where it's really like, just go do it. Just go jump in and see what happens, where it might not be that bad. And then in the moment, you can find actually that you can succeed more than you even thought was possible, because the fear of failure was way worse than like failing itself. And you didn't as well. So
let me kind of go back, summarize a couple things that you guys were talking about. And I think it's important. We're talking about the clarification of what is failure. Most of it's an identity issue that causes us to have the most wrong interpretation of pushing forward into something that it hits a vulnerability. When you're not insecure, failure has a completely different look. When you're confident, has a completely different look. You actually kind of want to see where your boundaries are. You want to see where the parameters are that are kind of the end result. So let's say now you deliberately have hit failure. There does come a point where you got to restore. Now you got to rebuild those muscle tissues. You don't just constantly every moment go into failure mode. It'll drain you. So how do you rebuild those places that you pushed deliberately? How do you, because that's where strength come from. So if you just hit failure, but you never go and rebuild that tissue, and you don't properly nourish it, and you don't properly put the right tools back in, like whether it's a job thing, like, okay, I hit failure. This is where my limit is. How do I step back now and build a habit, build a strength training program so I can push that limit again? It could be in fitness, it's changing your workout. All right, I'm hitting this max peak each time. I got to redo my workouts. I got to redo my rest times. I got to redo what kind of nutrition I'm putting in. What am I thinking about? You have to step back, and in that failure moment, that's where you step back. You know, it's a little bit easier when we're talking about like fitness because it's easier things to target. But if you're very competitive, if you're a competitor and you're a professional, man, you're at peaks all the time. So how do I get 1 more second? How do I get 5 more seconds? How do I get 1 more kilo? How do I, it's such minute areas that rest time and that recuperation becomes so much different. Our relationship with God, not so much our relationship with God, but our working with God in life has a place of that. Like, let's say you step out, quote unquote, in faith to do something and it just falls on your face, right? It's our first response is, well, you hear it a lot. Oh, it's either God did it or he's just being sovereign, or, you have all the excuses when you believed your hearing and you stepped out and it didn't work, or you're trusting a verse, or you're trusting a promise and maybe you misapplied it. Maybe you applied it properly and it just doesn't work. That stepping back and in the relationship with God. So from a God perspective, a fathering perspective, God, I stepped out, it didn't work. And he'll start walking you through, right, because there's part of you that won't listen. So I have to let you run forward, then I'll pull you back. Like whatever your character is, if you'll listen, he'll guide you through because he wants you to win more than you want to win. He wants you to rise more than you want to rise. Did you know that the creation itself wants you to rise more than you want to rise? It's waiting for the revealing of the sons of God. It wants to see what's been promised. It's us that's holding it back. So God's not the holding back, but our facade, our lies that we've told ourselves, our ways of doing things have caused us to get tripped up. So when we run into a place of failure, specifically with faith, stop making a theology about it. It is not a theology why you failed. If you're trusting a promise and it didn't come to pass, I prayed and it didn't work, how about go figure out something about the prayer? If you go pick up a squat rack and you say, well, I could go do 250, and you throw 250 on there and you go down and you pop your back. Was it the weight that was wrong? Was it the squat that's wrong? Is it because this is a bad exercise? No, hundreds and thousands and millions of people do the squat exercise and do phenomenal at it. You did it wrong. Now you could walk away going, oh, I'm so defeated. My identity, I'm such a loser. I did it wrong. Maybe God just doesn't understand. Or stop and be a good son for a moment and listen. Father, what do I need to do? And let him walk you through, because he wants you to have that promise more than you want the promise. Quit making theologies, quit making ideas, quit making identities around the failure. The failure just exposed what you tried to do within yourself. Now let it be rebuilt into a strength. That's strength. That's the place of victory. And we're so shallow. We're so shallow. Someone who's never worked out before, and they go and say, man, I'm going to start my workouts. And then they put as much weight on as they can, and they do that first day's workout. And then 2 days later, they're just limping around in absolute misery from the soreness that they just experienced. Do you know how many people don't want to go back to the gym after doing that? So many. It just hurts. Well, if you keep working at it, it doesn't hurt. You don't get hurt every time. It's because you've never done anything like this before. If you'll just listen and work through it, and it's not real pain, it's just lactic acid, you'll recover. You know, life is like that. And I think when we redefine what failure is in lines with a good identity, that you're secure, that you're God's pleased with you. You don't have to please men. It's not what man says about you. It's what God says about you. It's the Father taking you. A good father's going to bring you to your failure point so he can pull out what he sees that's really there. The failure shows your limitations, but it doesn't reveal the potential of your identity.
How often do you think, because I'm just listening to you, Brian, I'm like, this is like, man, I wish I had heard that, 3 years ago when I was sitting on the couch, kind of self-pity, like I failed at the Appalachian Trail. Everything that I thought I was is a lie. I'm not made up, like all these things, like the biggest like self-pity party I've probably ever had in my life, like horrible. And then being like, well, I'm just going to walk on my foot. And my parents being like, no, you literally can't, like you need to actually stay there because you're going to hurt yourself worse. And I'm like, but I'm sitting here instead of walking. And like, I guess in the moment when you're in the middle of like a failure, I would hear everything you're saying. I'd be like, but Brian, you don't know what it's like, Brian, because like I'm miserable and I feel these ways and I feel this way. And like, I have a guess of what I would tell myself, but sometimes even looking back, I'm like, what was wrong with me? I wouldn't even know what to tell myself back then or whatever. And I think I've only learned from it because I went through it and can kind of look back on it now. But like, what would you guys say to somebody who's like in the middle of some kind of failure like that, where you've been like, okay, well, I got over the field failure, but I went and did it. Like, Tommy, like, what would you say to yourself now that you've experienced the failure of sales? Like I'd be curious what the practical advice would be of like, keep going for it. Because I think sometimes it's like you can know all this stuff. Like I would probably know all the stuff you're saying, Brian, or have an idea of it. But like the practical of pushing through failure after you've experienced it, I would be curious what your advice would be, or what would be like, man, when you're that sore from the gym, you do not want to go back to the gym. So what would you tell somebody,
I think finding a coach, finding a mentor, finding someone who's been there before is kind of a important part of this whole process. And I think that goes back to what you were saying, Brian, being fathered by God, right? Going to God as a son and getting that guidance. Because I think of, I guess, going back a little bit, spring break, bunch of buddies, we're in college, we're undefeatable, we're the coolest bunch of guys ever, we're going to go climb this mountain in Utah. We set out at midnight, right? It's like, we're so stupid, so ignorant, we don't know what we're doing. But the thing that I will live with and that my friends taught me is they just kept going. They just kept going, they just kept going, they just kept going. They got to the top. I stopped about, like, I was 0.1 almost there to the top, and I stopped and I turned around and looked, and that fear just overcame me of looking down and seeing the situation I was in, and it froze me. Now, my friends weren't there to coach me and be like, oh, okay, get back on track, do this and get to the top. But it's that stopping, and that's where the failure comes. That's where the failure becomes fatal, when you stop, when you actually physically stop. When you're lifting weights and you no longer lift a weight again, that is the failure. It's not the failure if you're never going to be able to lift that weight again. Like, you're not going to be as strong as you were when you're 70 as when you were 25. But if you stop, that's the failure. Now, when you're in that failure moment, it's important to have someone who's been there before, who can guide you, who can father you in a sense, right? That's what happened in my job. I went 6 months And I was telling Jason and Brian, you were off just there a little bit, but that those 6 months, I learned so much that's now a gold mine. Like all those people I called and got no's. Well, I asked one more question. I prompted one more thing. I got told no one more time. And I have all that information to go back on it and to actually go pursue. But I couldn't do that without my boss. And my boss had been there before. But I needed to do the work to get there so that he could actually guide me in the correct way. So that he could see where I actually needed the guidance. He could coach me all day long on how to ask questions. But if it's not the questions and it's something else, it's my tone, it's my whatever, then he has no idea how to help me, right? And so I think it takes like this firm discipline in yourself that, because just be honest, I don't make 30 cold calls every day like I used to. I don't need to. Like I've gained that experience, I've gained that knowledge, and I have that now. And granted, I'm learning new things every day. Don't get me wrong, I'm getting uncomfortable and I'm failing still every day. But I have a different experience around this. The phone is no longer something that holds me up. Now I'm learning and growing in new ways. Now I'm learning, how do I ask questions in a way that I find the real problem? That I'm not asking like just the leading questions to get my answer, but I'm asking questions to get down to the solution, to know if it's even worth my time going down. Now I'm trying to save time for myself because I don't want to waste time with someone we don't have a solution for, right? And so I think it's this, going back, it's this undeniable keep pushing. The failure is if I stop. Like that's truly when the failure stops. Like if you're building a business, when you decide to close the doors permanently, that's when it's become the failure. It hasn't become the failure when you're still pushing through, barely making rent, barely making buy. You're not a failure there. And I would argue too that probably if you close the doors, that's not a failure because you've learned something that you can take on to the next thing, right? And so not to let that become your identity, but when you stop moving, that for me is when it becomes the failure. And then combining that with a coach, a mentor, or someone who can tweak it, right? Brian, what you're saying, like, oh yeah, you could do the 225 squat, but then you tweak your back. Well, your back's not strong. You got to train your back. You know, it's not your quads, it's your ankles, or it's whatever, you know, it's something else that's weak inside of you that needs training too. And if you just keep training, oh, I'm just going to keep doing this and push through. Well, what about your technique? What about what you're eating? What about energy levels? What about when you're training? What about all the different things, your mindset going into training? That I think is where you take on the true strength is knowing I'm not going to quit. And now I have someone with me to guide me.
Yeah.
And I'll just leave that's the maturing in all this, of knowing when to keep pushing, when to step back and reevaluate, not for a sense of quitting, but to make sure there's another area that doesn't need to be developed in order to move forward in. And you start learning those differences. And yes, to your point, you need people that have been there and can speak into it. But this is part of the reason why, even if you don't have another person per se, you can go read the Old Testament characters. And here's the thing, they all made it to their end goal. They were written in the Hall of Faith. We don't like some of their journey and some of their failures and some of the things they did. Quit looking at it as, wow, I could avoid that failure. Start discovering, what did they learn from the failure? And go do that. What did they take from it? And go do that. Like, it's laid out for us. So there's enough examples to make it through and to see this happen. So take a new look at failure, walk in your identity, and quit making your outcome your pride, which is what destroys us the most, and take your identity inside.
Awesome. Well, we're going to wrap it up with that. To any of you guys out there listening in who are just feeling it right now, I just want to let you know, we understand it, man. We've been there. We've got 150 to 200 years of life experience between the four of us. We've been there, bud. You're not alone in it. Keep pushing through. If you need to rest, and then get back to it. We appreciate you. Until next time, keep the faith and stay in the fight.